The night it happened, the world felt unusually heavy. The rain was falling in slow, steady drops, tapping against the kitchen window like an impatient reminder that life never pauses for anyone. I stood by the sink, hands deep in soapy water, scrubbing the same plate over and over again, not because it was dirty, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. The faint smell of baked chicken still lingered in the air, mixing with the earthy scent of rain. This house, once filled with laughter, now felt like a stranger's home. My daughter Lily was in the living room with her friends, their laughter rising and falling like waves crashing against fragile walls. I tried not to listen, but mothers always hear what they're not supposed to. Between bursts of giggles and clinking glasses, I caught fragments of their conversation, shallow comments about social media, parties, and the people they admired. Then one of them said something about me. "Your mom's sweet, I guess, but she's like old-fashioned, isn't she?" There was a pause, the kind that feels like a drop before a crash, and then Lily's voice, sharp and careless. "Old-fashioned? Please, my mom's old and pathetic." The laughter that followed felt like a punch to my chest. My fingers froze in the water, the plate slipped and clattered into the sink, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding too loudly for me to hear anything else. For a moment, I thought I must have misheard her. My Lily, my little girl who used to hold my hand on stormy nights, who once drew pictures of us together and called me her hero, couldn't have said that. But the sound of her voice was unmistakable. I stood there, unmoving while their laughter carried on. I wanted to storm into the room and tell her everything, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every tear I had hidden behind a tired smile. I wanted her to understand how much of my life had been built around hers. But instead, I did what I had done for years. I swallowed the pain and stayed silent. That silence, though, felt heavier than ever before. When her friends finally left, the house went quiet except for the ticking of the clock. Lily appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, her face glowing under the blue light of the screen. She looked up at me briefly, annoyance flickering in her eyes, as if I had interrupted her thoughts. "What?" she said sharply. "Nothing," I whispered. My voice came out smaller than I intended. She sighed, rolling her eyes. "If this is about earlier, don't be dramatic, Mom. It was just a joke." A joke. That's what she called it. I nodded slowly, pretending it didn't hurt, pretending I was strong. But when she turned away and went upstairs, something inside me shattered completely. I stood there in the quiet, surrounded by the ghosts of my own sacrifices. Every corner of that house held a memory. The nights I stayed up when she had a fever, the mornings I packed her lunch while fighting exhaustion from double shifts, the birthdays I made special even when I could barely afford a cake. And now, after everything, my daughter saw me as nothing more than pathetic. I walked to my small bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of years pressing down on my shoulders. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, the wrinkles etched deep around my mouth, the strands of gray sneaking through my hair. When had I gotten so old? Or was it that I had simply forgotten to see myself until now? I reached for the framed photo on my nightstand, Lily at 5 years old, her arms wrapped around my neck, her face glowing with love and trust. My eyes burned. That little girl had once thought I was the whole world. When did that change? When did I change? Tears slid silently down my cheeks, but I didn't stop them this time. I had cried in secret for years, behind closed doors, in bathroom stalls at work, in the car when no one could see. But this felt different. This wasn't just sadness. It was a kind of awakening, painful but powerful.
For the first time, I wasn't crying because I was broken. I was crying because I was done being invisible. That night, as the rain continued to fall, I made a quiet promise to myself. I didn't know what I would do yet. I had no plan, no grand vision of revenge or redemption, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this, defined by what others thought of me, especially not by my own daughter's cruel words. I realized that I had spent so much of my life serving others that I had forgotten what it meant to be someone outside of them. I closed my eyes and whispered into the darkness, "No more." It wasn't a scream or a cry for attention, just a whisper, but it carried the weight of years of silence. I would find myself again, not for Lily, not for the world, but for me. When morning came, the sun peeked timidly through the clouds, painting the room in a soft golden glow. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel dread about facing the day. I felt something else. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Hope.
The next morning arrived quietly, carrying with it the faint chill of early dawn. I woke before my alarm, my body still heavy from the weight of last night's tears. The house was silent. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of sparrows filled the air. For a while, I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the pale light creeping through the curtains. My eyes were swollen, but my heart felt strangely steady. Something inside me had shifted, a quiet, fragile strength that I hadn't felt in years. When I walked into the kitchen, everything looked the same. The pile of unwashed dishes, the half-empty coffee jar, the faint marks on the wall where Lily used to measure her height when she was little. Yet, everything felt different. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I brewed my coffee slowly, savoring the aroma that filled the room. For once, I didn't rush to make breakfast, pack lunches, or fold clothes. I just stood there, holding my mug, looking out the window at the morning sky that was slowly turning pink. When Lily came downstairs, she looked startled to see me sitting at the table in my robe, reading an old book instead of bustling around like usual. Her hair was messy, her backpack half open, and she was already running late. "Mom, what are you doing?" she asked, half annoyed, half confused. I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "Having my morning," I said calmly. She frowned. "But you didn't make breakfast." I smiled gently. "You're 16 now. I think you can handle a bowl of cereal." She blinked, clearly taken aback. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to argue, but then she just rolled her eyes and mumbled, "Whatever." As she stormed out, I noticed something in her expression, not just irritation, but confusion. Maybe for the first time, she was realizing that I wasn't standing in the same quiet shadow I'd always lived in. After she left, I felt a strange sense of lightness. I turned on the radio, an old station that played soft 80s songs, and let the music fill the empty spaces of the house. I started cleaning slowly, but this time not out of duty, but out of choice. Each folded towel, each wiped surface felt like reclaiming a small piece of order in my life. Later that afternoon, while sorting through the attic, I found an old box labeled "Me." Inside were relics of a woman I almost forgotten. Sketchbooks filled with drawings, dried out tubes of paint, and faded letters from art galleries that had once invited me to exhibit my work. I traced my fingers over a charcoal sketch of a sunflower I had drawn in my 20s. Strong, tall, unafraid of the light. My throat tightened. I remembered how alive I used to feel when I was creating, how every line on paper felt like a breath, every color like a heartbeat. I sat there for a long time, surrounded by memories of who I used to be. Then, quietly, I said aloud, "I miss you."
The sound of my voice startled me. It had been so long since I had spoken words meant only for myself. That evening, I took one of the old sketchbooks downstairs and placed it on the dining room table. I sharpened a pencil and began to draw. At first, my hand was clumsy, my lines unsure, but soon muscle memory returned. Soft strokes, delicate shadows, the rhythm of creation flowing through me again. Hours passed without me noticing. When I finally looked at the clock, it was nearly midnight. I felt tired, but in a beautiful way, the kind of exhaustion that comes not from pain, but from purpose. When I looked at what I'd drawn, a woman sitting by a window, her face turned toward the light, I realized I had drawn myself, not as I was, but as I wanted to be, strong, serene, awake. In the following days, I began doing small things for myself, waking up early to walk in the park, reading again, listening to old songs that used to make me smile. I stopped apologizing for existing. When Lily made snide comments, I no longer reacted with tears or anger. I simply smiled and let her words fall away like rain hitting stone. She didn't understand what was happening yet, but I did. I was slowly becoming the woman I had buried beneath motherhood, duty, and exhaustion. One morning, as I tied my hair and looked into the mirror, I noticed something I hadn't seen in years, a spark in my own eyes. It wasn't youth returning, it was life. The lines on my face didn't look like signs of aging anymore. They looked like proof that I had survived every battle, quietly and gracefully. That day, I decided to visit the library. It had been years since I'd walked through those quiet aisles. The librarian, a kind woman with silver hair, recognized me immediately. "It's been a long time," she said warmly. "Looking for something special?" "Yes," I replied softly. "Myself." I checked out a stack of books, novels, art history, even a few about self-discovery. I carried them home like treasures, feeling the excitement of possibility stirring in me again. That night, as I lay in bed reading, I realized something profound. Lily's cruel words had broken me open, but maybe that was exactly what I needed. Maybe pain, when faced instead of feared, could become a doorway to rediscovery. I closed the book, looked out at the moonlight spilling through the window, and whispered a silent promise. I will not let her words define me. I will define myself. For the first time in a long time, I drifted into sleep with a quiet smile, not because life was perfect, but because I was finally taking the first steps towards loving the woman I had forgotten to be.
A week later, as I walked home from the grocery store, something caught my eye, a bright flyer taped to a street lamp just outside the park. Community art class, beginner's welcome, every Saturday, 10 a.m. The words stared back at me, glowing like a forgotten dream resurfacing through the fog of time. My hands trembled slightly as I tore the flyer from the pole. I stood there, clutching it against my chest while people passed by, umbrellas bobbing under the gray sky. I could almost hear Lily's voice in my head, mocking, dismissive, cruel, old and pathetic. But I also heard something else, softer, stronger, my own voice whispering from somewhere deep inside, "Try again." The next Saturday, I walked into the community center with my heart pounding like a drum. The room smelled faintly of acrylic and coffee. Paintbrushes, easels, and colorful canvases filled the space, and the sound of laughter and conversation floated in the air. For a moment, I almost turned back. I felt out of place, like a faded photograph in a room full of color. Most of the students were young, confident, their clothes splattered with paint that looked like badges of pride. But then I saw a small sign near the back of the room. "Art is for the soul, not the age." That one line made me stay. The instructor, a man named Daniel, was in his early 40s,
tall, with kind eyes and paint-stained hands that spoke of years spent creating. He greeted me with a smile that instantly melted my nerves. "You must be new," he said. "What brings you here?" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "I used to paint," I admitted quietly, "a long time ago. I thought maybe I could try again." He nodded, as if that was all he needed to hear. "Then you're already an artist. Welcome back." His words hit me harder than I expected. Welcome back. No one had said that to me in years. Not, "How have you been?" Not, "Where have you been?" But welcome back. It felt like an invitation to return, not to a place, but to myself. During the first session, my hands trembled as I picked up a brush. The smell of paint, the rough texture of canvas, it was all so familiar yet distant, like a language I hadn't spoken in decades. My strokes were uneven, clumsy, uncertain. I painted a landscape, a lonely tree in the middle of a storm. It wasn't beautiful, but it was honest. Every stroke carried the weight of exhaustion, heartbreak, and quiet endurance. When Daniel came by to look, I braced myself for polite encouragement or criticism, but instead he smiled. "That's real," he said softly. "Don't paint to impress, paint to express. Art should hurt a little. That's how we know it's alive." His words lingered long after class ended. I walked home that day with paint on my fingers and something else: purpose. It wasn't about becoming good again. It was about remembering that I could still feel. Over the next few weeks, I started looking forward to Saturdays more than anything. Each class became a sanctuary, a space where I didn't have to be mom or someone's burden. I could just be me. I made a few friends there: a retired teacher named Margaret, who painted flowers, a shy teenager named Amira, who sketched her dreams, and Daniel, who encouraged us all with the same gentle patience. Together we talked, laughed, and shared pieces of our lives through color and canvas. At home, however, things with Lily remained distant. She noticed the changes, though she didn't know what to make of them. One evening, as I unpacked my paints, she looked up from her phone and frowned. "You're taking art classes?" she asked, as if the idea itself was absurd. "Yes," I said simply. She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" I smiled. "Because I used to love it." She scoffed. "That's weird. You're like too old for that kind of thing." Once, those words would have broken me, but now they barely touched me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the confusion in her eyes. She didn't understand how her mother, the woman she thought she could dismiss, was suddenly doing something she couldn't control or belittle. I didn't argue. I just smiled and said, "Maybe one day you'll understand." Over the next month, my art improved, but more importantly, I improved. My back stood straighter, my eyes brighter. I began waking up early, walking through the park before class, breathing in the air like I was learning to live again. People at the grocery store smiled at me more, perhaps sensing something new: confidence, peace, or maybe just lightness. Daniel noticed it too. One day after class, he approached me with a thoughtful expression. "You've come a long way. Have you ever thought about showing your work?" I laughed nervously. "Show my work? Oh no, I'm not." He interrupted gently. "You are. You just don't believe it yet." I looked at my painting, a portrait of a woman standing in the rain, her face lifted towards the sky. She looked strong, unbroken, radiant. And for the first time I realized that woman was me. That night, I stayed up late painting. The clock ticked past midnight, but I didn't care. Each brushstroke felt like a declaration. I am still here. I am still capable. I am not pathetic. When I finally set the brush down, tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. The same words Lily had thrown at me like daggers had become the fire that rebuilt me. The day of the community art fair arrived like a quiet storm. I hadn't planned to pontificate at first. The thought of strangers judging my work made my stomach twist with anxiety. But Daniel had insisted, art deserves to be seen, he told me, even if it's only by one person who understands it. His faith in me had become a kind of mirror. Through his eyes, I was starting to see someone I hadn't met in years, a woman who believed in herself. The morning sun filtered through my curtains as I packed my canvases carefully, wrapping each one in brown paper. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from anticipation. Lily sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through her phone, earbuds in. For a moment, I thought about telling her where I was going, but then I stopped. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. The fair was set up in the town square, rows of tents and booths filled with handmade crafts, pottery, jewelry, and paintings. The air smelled of roasted nuts and freshly brewed coffee. I found my assigned spot near the fountain, where the sound of splashing water mixed with the chatter of early visitors. Daniel helped me set up, his calm presence grounding me. As the hours passed, people came and went, stopping to look at my work. Some asked questions, others just smiled quietly before moving on. I watched their faces, the way their eyes softened when they stood in front of my paintings. I had displayed 7 pieces, each one a chapter of my own silent story. The storm, the loneliness, the rediscovery, and finally, the light. Around midday, an older woman stopped in front of one painting and began to cry. It was the portrait I had painted of the woman standing in the rain, the one that looked so much like me. "It feels like she's been through everything," the woman whispered, "but she's still standing." I felt my throat tighten. "She is," I said softly. "She always will." Later, a local reporter from a small community magazine stopped by. "Your work has such emotional depth," she said, jotting notes in her pad. "Would you mind if we featured you in next month's issue?" I blinked in disbelief. "Me? Are you sure?" She smiled. "Absolutely. People need stories like yours, proof that it's never too late to begin again." By the end of the day, I had sold 3 paintings. It wasn't about the money, it was about validation. Proof that my pain had transformed into something meaningful, something beautiful. Daniel clapped me on the shoulder as we packed up. "See," he said, "you just needed to let the world see what I already did." That night, as I walked home under the fading sunset, I felt lighter than air. For the first time in years, the silence of my home didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like peace. I placed the remaining paintings around the living room, filling the walls that had long been blank and cold. The house suddenly looked alive again, as though it had been waiting for me to return. When Lily came home later that evening, she froze in the doorway. "What's all this?" she asked, staring at the paintings. I smiled, wiping my hands on a cloth. "This is my art," I said simply. "I showed them at the fair today." Her eyebrows shot up. "You did what?" "I participated in the community art fair," I said, keeping my tone calm. 3 of my paintings were sold." She looked at me as if I had just told her I climbed Mount Everest. "You sold them? Like people actually bought your paintings?" I nodded, amused by her disbelief. "Yes, they did." For the first time, Lily didn't have a ready insult. She just stood there, silent, trying to process the new version of me that she hadn't expected to meet. I could see in her eyes a flicker of confusion, maybe even pride, though she'd never admit it. In the days that followed, the article was published in the community magazine with the title, "It's Never Too Late to Begin Again: The Art of Rediscovery." It featured a photo of me standing beside my paintings, smiling in a way I hadn't in years. My phone began to ring with messages from old friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had read my story. "Your journey inspired me. I started painting again after reading your article. You made me believe in second chances." Each message felt like a warm embrace, a quiet validation that my pain had turned into purpose. Meanwhile, something began to shift between Lily and me. She didn't say much at first, but her tone softened. She started coming home earlier, sometimes lingering in the living room staring at the paintings. One night, as I sat sketching by the window, she hesitated before speaking. "Mom," she said quietly, "can I watch you paint sometime?" The question caught me off guard. I turned to look at her, her eyes unsure, her voice small, almost childlike. I smiled gently. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I'd love that." She sat beside me as I mixed the colors, burnt sienna, ivory, and soft gray. The brush moved effortlessly in my hand, but what filled the room wasn't the sound of strokes. It was the silence of understanding. As the painting took shape, Lily finally spoke again. "I didn't mean what I said before," she whispered, "about you being old and pathetic. I was just angry. I didn't realize how much you'd given up for me." Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't stop painting. "We all say things we don't mean," I said softly. "What matters is what we learn after." She nodded, wiping her tears. "You're amazing, Mom. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." At that moment, something inside me, something long buried, finally healed. Forgiveness, quiet and deep, filled the air like the scent of rain after a long drought. That night, as I looked at my reflection in the window, I no longer saw the woman who had once felt old and forgotten. I saw strength. I saw resilience. I saw rebirth.
The days that followed our quiet reconciliation were filled with something new. Lightness. Not the fragile kind that could shatter at the first harsh word, but a gentle, enduring brightness that came from forgiveness. Lily started joining me in small ways, handing me brushes, asking about color tones, even cleaning up the studio after I painted. It was awkward at first, but it was real. I could feel her trying, and that effort was worth more than any apology. One evening, as I was finishing a landscape, Lily came running into the living room holding her phone. "Mom," she gasped, "look." On the screen was an email from a local art gallery downtown. The subject line read, "Invitation, Solo Exhibition Opportunity." My heart stopped. I opened the message, my fingers trembling as I read. "Dear Miss Carter, we came across your story in the community magazine and were deeply moved by both your journey and your art. We would be honored to host your first solo exhibition next month. Please let us know if you're interested." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt unreal, as if the universe had opened a small door I'd forgotten existed. Lily squealed and threw her arms around me. "Mom, this is huge. You have to do it." Tears welled in my eyes. "Do you really think I can?" I whispered. She smiled, that same radiant smile I hadn't seen since she was little. "Mom, you already did." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the moonlight glimmering across the canvases that lined my wall. I thought about the years I had wasted believing that my time had passed, that dreams had an expiration date. But now I realize something profound. Life doesn't stop giving us chances. We just stop taking them. The following weeks were a blur of preparation. Daniel and my art group helped me choose the pieces that would be displayed. We settled on 12, each one representing a different chapter of my journey. There was The Storm Within, The Silent Years, Breaking Dawn, and the one everyone seemed to love, The Woman in the Rain. Lily took charge of the event planning with an energy I hadn't seen in years. She designed invitations, handled the gallery's website updates, and even started promoting the show on social media. "You're trending, Mom," she teased one morning, scrolling through dozens of supportive comments. I laughed. "Trending? I barely know what that means." She grinned. "It means people love you. They love your story." For the first time in my life, it wasn't about proving something to anyone, not to my daughter, not to society, not even to myself. It was about celebrating the woman I had become.
The night of the exhibition arrived, and the gallery shimmered with golden lights. The air buzzed with quiet admiration as people drifted between the paintings, glasses of wine in hand. I stood in a corner, my heart thudding in my chest, watching strangers connect with the pieces that had once come from my pain. Each painting carried a memory. The nights I cried quietly, the mornings I forced myself to rise, the moments I thought I'd lost everything. And now they stood tall, proud, and alive, proof that beauty can bloom even from brokenness. Then I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Miss Carter." I turned to see the gallery owner, a woman in her 50s, elegant and warm. "Your story," she said, "is one of the most moving I've heard in years. You've given people hope. Would you be open to doing a short speech?" My heart pounded. Public speaking was never my strength. But as I looked around at Lily's proud eyes, Daniel's encouraging smile, and the strangers whose lives my art had touched, I realized this was my moment. I walked to the small podium, my hands trembling slightly. The room quieted. "Good evening," I began softly. "I never thought I'd stand here. A few months ago, I was a woman who believed her best years were behind her. I felt invisible to the world, to my family, and worst of all, to myself." I paused, the weight of truth grounding me. Then one day, my daughter said something that broke me. She called me old and pathetic. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but I smiled gently. It hurt. It really did. But it also woke me up. It made me realize that I had stopped living long before she said those words. I glanced at Lily, who was already in tears. So I picked up a paintbrush. I started small, one stroke, one color, one canvas at a time. And in doing so, I found not just art, but myself. Applause filled the room. My throat tightened, but I continued. Tonight isn't just about paintings. It's about second chances. It's about remembering that no matter your age, your pain, or your mistakes, you can start again. You can always start again. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some wiping away tears. I felt warmth spread through my chest, not pride, but peace. I had finally arrived where I was always meant to be. After the speech, people lined up to speak with me, sharing their own stories of loss, healing, and renewal. One young woman whispered, "Your words make me call my mom again after 2 years." Another said, "I thought it was too late for me, but now, maybe it's not." As the night drew to a close, Lily hugged me tightly. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm so proud of you. You're the bravest person I know." I smiled through my tears. "I think we both learned something, didn't we?" She nodded. "Yeah, that strength doesn't fade with age, it grows." When everyone had left and the gallery lights dimmed, I stood before my favorite painting, The Woman in the Rain. The colors shimmered softly under the light, her face turned toward the sky, her eyes filled with defiance and grace. That woman had once been broken, but tonight she stood reborn, not through anyone else's validation, but through her own courage. As I looked at her, I whispered, "You did it." And for the first time in decades, I didn't mean the woman in the painting. I meant me. The morning after the exhibition felt like waking from a beautiful dream that hadn't quite ended. The sunlight streamed through my curtains, golden and soft, falling across the framed article from the community magazine that still sat on my table. My phone buzzed nonstop, notifications, messages, calls. Overnight, my speech had gone viral. Someone had recorded it at the gallery and posted it online with the caption, "She was called old and pathetic. Her response will make you cry." Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. The comments poured in, people from every corner of the world writing about how my story had touched their hearts. I'm 62 and just signed up for my first dance class. Thank you. Your words gave me courage to leave a toxic marriage. I called my mom today. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. I sat there reading them, tears streaming down my face. It was overwhelming, not in a painful way, but in the way that reminds you that your life, no matter how small it once felt, has the power to ripple out and change others. When Lily came into the kitchen that morning, she was grinning ear to ear. "Mom, you're all over social media. Everyone's talking about your speech." I laughed, shaking my head. I can't even figure out how to use hashtags, and somehow I've gone viral? She giggled. "I'm managing it for you. I made you an Instagram account last night. You already have 10,000 followers." 10,000? I repeated, nearly spilling my tea. "Yeah," she said proudly. "They love your art, but more than that, they love you." She showed me the comments. Women, men, even teenagers, sharing photos of themselves painting, dancing, writing, rediscovering forgotten parts of their souls. I scrolled through the messages, each one like a small miracle. Lily's eyes softened as she watched me. "I didn't realize how much you were capable of, Mom, or how much the world needed you." I reached over and took her hand. "And I didn't realize how much you were watching. Maybe we both learned something." From that day, my life became a whirlwind of interviews, collaborations, and endless requests. The gallery invited me to host an art and healing workshop where people of all ages came to express their pain through color and form. Each session was filled with laughter, tears, and transformation. I watched people discover the same magic I had, that creativity isn't about perfection, it's about truth. Lily became my assistant, manager, and biggest supporter. She documented my work online, posted videos of my process, and even created short motivational clips using my old journal entries. "You're inspiring people, Mom. You're helping them believe again." I smiled every time she said that because deep down, I knew she was healing too. One afternoon, as I was teaching a class at the community center, a young woman approached me after everyone left. Her eyes were red from crying. "Mrs. Carter," she said softly, "I came here because I saw your video. My mom passed away last year, and I've been angry at the world ever since. But watching you reminded me that she would have wanted me to keep living, to keep creating." I took her hand and said, "Grief never really leaves us, but it can become our teacher. Paint with it, and you'll see, it can turn into something beautiful." She smiled through her tears, and I realized something. My pain had become someone else's hope. That's how redemption works. It doesn't erase what hurt us. It transforms it into something that heals others. Months passed and my art continued to grow, not just in skill, but in spirit. I began experimenting with new mediums, each painting reflecting another layer of who I'd become. One of my newest pieces, Rebirth of Light, was selected for a national exhibition. It depicted a woman stepping out of shadows, holding a candle that illuminated everything behind her. When it sold for more than I'd ever imagined, I donated half of the money to a women's foundation that supported older artists and single mothers. When the foundation invited me to speak at their annual event, I hesitated at first, but Lily insisted. "You have to, Mom. Your story is hope, living, breathing hope." That evening, as I stood on stage before hundreds of women, I looked at the faces filled with exhaustion, courage, and longing. I began softly. "When I was called old and pathetic, I believed it for a while. I thought my story was over, but I was wrong. Sometimes life closes a chapter so we can learn how to write a better one." The applause was thunderous. Afterwards, dozens of women came up to me, each with their own version of the same confession. I thought it was too late for me. It wasn't just art anymore. It was purpose. My life, once quiet and small, had blossomed into something that reached far beyond my living room walls. At home, Lily and I grew closer than ever. We cooked dinner together, shared long walks, and even painted side by side on weekends. One night, as we sat in the studio, she hesitated before speaking. "Mom," she said softly, "I want to study art therapy. I want to help people the way you helped me." Tears filled my eyes. "That's beautiful, Lily." She smiled shyly. "I guess you inspired me too." That simple sentence filled my chest with a warmth I can't describe. It was the kind of healing that doesn't come in a rush. It unfolds slowly, quietly, until one day you realize the ache is gone. As the months turned into a year, I often thought about the moment that started it all. Those cruel words, old and pathetic. It was strange to think how something so painful had led to something so extraordinary. Now, when I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw wrinkles or gray strands. I saw lines of wisdom and streaks of survival. I saw a woman who had fallen apart and built herself again, not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove herself right. One evening, while I was painting The Final Bloom, a massive canvas of wildflowers bursting through cracked concrete, Lily came up behind me, resting her chin on my shoulder. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's life," I replied softly. "No matter how broken the ground, something can still grow." She smiled. "You really are incredible, Mom." I turned, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. "And so are you, my love. Because you learned what I did, that love and forgiveness are the truest forms of art." We stood there in silence, mother and daughter, surrounded by color and light. Two souls who had once been lost, now finding each other again through the power of creation.
A year after that fateful night when my daughter's words shattered me, the world around me had transformed, and so had I. The walls of my home, once bare and lifeless, were now filled with color and memory. Each painting told a story of pain, of rediscovery, of forgiveness. My art had become more than therapy. It had become my legacy, and somehow that legacy had reached far beyond the boundaries of my small town. The video of my speech had now gathered over 20 million views. I had become, as some called me online, the woman who started again. It sounded strange, almost surreal, but every time someone said it, I smiled quietly, because I knew it wasn't fame that mattered. It was the message behind it, that life, no matter how bruised or weary, could still bloom again. Invitations started pouring in. Talk shows, podcasts, international women's conferences. One day, an email arrived from the Global Women's Summit in London, inviting me as a keynote speaker. I read it 3 times before I believed it was real. Lily was ecstatic. "Mom, London, this is huge," she shouted, spinning me around the room. "You have to go." I laughed through my tears. Me, standing on a stage in front of thousands of people? She grinned. Exactly, the same woman who once thought she was too old to dream. A few months later, I found myself boarding a plane, the first time I'd ever traveled outside the country. As I looked out the window at the clouds, I thought of the timid woman I used to be, afraid of judgment, afraid of failing, afraid of living. I whispered a small prayer of gratitude, because now I wasn't just living, I was thriving.
London was a dream painted in silver and rain. The conference hall was massive, chandeliers glimmering above, banners with words like empowerment, resilience, and rebirth. I stood backstage, my hands trembling slightly as I clutched my speech. I looked at Lily sitting in the front row, smiling, filming with her phone. That smile gave me courage. When my name was announced, the applause thundered through the hall. I walked onto the stage, every step carrying the weight of the woman I once was, and the strength of the woman I had become. "Good evening," I began, softly, my voice steady despite the emotion swelling inside. A year ago, I was just a mother, forgotten by her own reflection. I was told I was old, I was told I was pathetic, and for a while, I believed it. The room was silent, hundreds of faces watching, listening. But pain, I continued, can be the beginning of something beautiful, if we let it teach us. I picked up a paintbrush and began again, and in those colors I found forgiveness, strength, and love, not just for others, but for myself. I looked out at the crowd, my eyes meeting Lily's tearful gaze. I said, "My daughter once broke my heart, but she also helped me find it again." Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who lead us to our greatest healing. By the time I finished, the entire audience was on its feet, clapping, cheering, crying. Women rushed to the stage afterward to hug me, thanking me for reminding them that it's never too late to start over. The next morning, headlines around the world read, "60-year-old mother inspires millions with her story of reinvention and love. The woman who turned pain into purpose." But the most meaningful thing didn't come from the press. It came from Lily. That evening, as we sat in our hotel room overlooking the London skyline, she handed me her phone. She said, "I posted something." She smiled nervously. "I think you should read it." It was an open letter she had written and shared online. The title read, "To the mother I once called old and pathetic, I'm sorry." My heart stopped as I began to read. A year ago, I said words that I can never take back. I thought my mother's time had passed. I thought she was weak. I was wrong. My mom didn't just prove me wrong. She taught me what true strength looks like. She showed me that age doesn't define you, failure doesn't end you, and forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. I used to be embarrassed to call her my mom. Now I can't stop telling the world how proud I am. So to every daughter out there, before you dismiss your mother's dreams, remember, she gave up hers so you could build yours. Don't wait to see her light until she's gone. Mom, you are my hero. By the time I finished reading, I was sobbing. Lily reached for my hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "I mean it, Mom," she whispered. "You changed my life." I pulled her into my arms, holding her like I had when she was little. "And you changed mine," I whispered back. Because love, even when it breaks us, is what rebuilds us. The letter spread faster than either of us expected. Within days, it was shared by major media outlets, read aloud on talk shows, even translated into multiple languages. People everywhere were sending in stories of their mothers, their regrets, their reconciliations. It had become more than just my story. It was our story. A story of every woman who had been underestimated, every mother who had been forgotten, every heart that had once been called too late. Weeks later, when we returned home, I received a letter from a teenage girl. She wrote, "After watching your story, I told my mom I loved her for the first time in years. Thank you for reminding me she's still my hero." That letter now sits framed in my studio, a daily reminder of what this journey was truly about. Life has a funny way of turning our deepest wounds into our greatest testimonies. What began as heartbreak had become healing. What began as shame had become strength. Now when I paint, I no longer paint the storms. I paint the light that follows them, golden, defiant, and eternal. And sometimes when Lily joins me in the studio, she teases me, "You're famous now, Mom. The whole world knows your story." I just smile, dipping my brush into the color that shines brightest, hope. Because at the end of it all, this wasn't a story about fame or forgiveness, or even art. It was about rediscovery, about a woman who was told she was old and pathetic, but instead became timeless.
Time has a gentle way of softening the sharp edges of the past. 2 years have passed since that day in London, and though the world has changed around me, the rhythm of my life has found a peaceful balance. I live in the same house, but it no longer feels like a place of silence and regret. It's a life with laughter, with art, with visitors who come from near and far to meet the woman who painted her pain into purpose. My mornings begin with sunlight filtering through the curtains and the faint smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Lily often visits on weekends now, bringing her little boy, my grandson, Noah. He's 4 years old, curious and endlessly full of questions. He likes to run his tiny fingers across my paintings, asking, "Grandma, why do you use so many colors?" I smile and tell him, "Because life isn't just one color, my love. It's many, even the dark ones." He giggles and replies, "Then I'll paint with all the colors too." And in that moment, I see the beautiful continuation of a legacy I never planned, but one that life gifted me anyway. Sometimes I catch Lily watching me quietly, her eyes soft and full of something unspoken, admiration, perhaps, or guilt that still lingers in the corners of her heart. One afternoon, as we sipped tea on the porch, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom," she said gently, "do you ever think about that night? The one when I said those terrible things?" I looked out at the garden, where sunlight danced on the petals of the roses I'd planted the spring after everything happened. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not with pain anymore. More like gratitude." "Gratitude?" she asked, puzzled. "Yes," I said softly, "because if you hadn't broken me, I might never have rebuilt myself. Sometimes love needs to shatter to learn how to shine." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She leaned over and hugged me tightly, whispering, "You're the strongest woman I know, Mom, and I'm proud, so proud to be your daughter." That night, after they left, I stood in my studio, staring at my newest painting, a piece I'd been working on for months. It was a depiction of two women standing side by side, one older, her face lined with wisdom, her eyes calm and kind, the other younger, her face shadowed with guilt, but reaching out, seeking connection. Between them flowed a river of color, blues, golds, and silvers, intertwining like the threads of forgiveness. I titled it "The Bridge Between Us." When it was unveiled at a local exhibition, people stood silently before it, many moved to tears. A journalist from a major art magazine asked me what inspired it. I told her, "It's about motherhood, the most painful and the most powerful form of love. It's about finding each other again, even after words have broken something sacred." That piece would go on to be displayed at a museum dedicated to women's resilience. I was invited to speak again, not as someone seeking redemption, but as someone living it. I began traveling frequently, mentoring women, hosting art therapy workshops, speaking to daughters and mothers who had forgotten how to talk to each other. I saw women painting their grief into sunsets, writing letters to the mothers they'd lost, holding each other and crying, not from pain, but from release. And in those circles of healing, I found something that no fame, no recognition could ever give me: purpose. During one of these workshops, a teenage girl came up to me, holding a small painting she had made. It showed a broken heart stitched together with threads of gold. "I used to hate my mom," she confessed, "but after reading your story, I realized I just missed her. I called her yesterday for the first time in years. She cried. So did I." I hugged her, tears filling my own eyes. "You've already begun to heal," I said, "and that's the bravest thing anyone can do." As time moved forward, I began to slow down, not because of exhaustion,
but because I had finally learned the art of peace. I started writing my memoir, not for the world, but for Lily and Noah, a collection of memories, lessons, and quiet truths. The opening line reads, "Forgiveness is the color that never fades." Sometimes, when I sit by the window and watch the evening sky turn shades of lavender and gold, I think about how far I've come. From a woman who once cried in silence, believing her life was over, to someone who became a symbol of renewal. There are moments when Lily and I walk through the park together, and she'll tease me, "You've become a celebrity, Mom. Do people still recognize you?" I laugh. "Only when I wear my paint-stained coat." But deep down I know, I'm not famous. I'm free. Free from the weight of regret. Free from the voice that once told me I was old and pathetic. Because the truth is, those words no longer define me. They were just the beginning of a story that turned pain into power. As I near my 70th birthday, I've decided to hold one final exhibition, a grand collection of all my life's work. I plan to call it Becoming Light. Each painting will represent a chapter: grief, forgiveness, love, and rebirth. And in the center, under soft golden lighting, will hang The Bridge Between Us. When I told Lily about it, she smiled through tears. "Can I help you organize it?" she asked. I nodded. No one else I'd rather have by my side. The night of the exhibition, the hall was filled with familiar faces: students, mothers, artists, even strangers who had followed my journey online. As I stepped up to speak, I looked at Lily, who stood proudly beside Noah. My story began with anger, but it ends with love, because no matter how broken we become, there's always a way to rebuild. We just have to start, even if our hands shake. The applause that followed felt different this time. Not thunderous, not overwhelming, but warm, like the closing of a circle. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I stood alone in the gallery, the lights dimmed except for one, shining softly on The Bridge Between Us. I touched the edge of the canvas and whispered, "We made it, didn't we?" In the reflection of the glass, I saw my daughter and myself not as two women divided by time and words, but as one story, one heart, forever intertwined. And in that still golden moment, I finally understood. Being called old wasn't an insult. It was a gift. Because growing old meant living long enough to heal. So now, when Noah paints beside me, I tell him, every color has a purpose, even the dark ones. He grins and dips his brush into gold. "Then I'll use all of them, Grandma." And as the sunlight catches his tiny masterpiece, I smile, knowing that this is how stories live on. Not in pain, not in shame, but in love passed forward. Because in the end, life isn't about what we lose. It's about what we choose to create from the pieces left behind.
The years have flowed like a river, gentle, persistent, and unstoppable. I am 72 now, and though my hands tremble slightly when I paint, my spirit has never felt steadier. My story, once whispered through the cracks of heartbreak, has found its way into hearts across oceans. Sometimes I still receive letters, handwritten, beautiful, and raw, from strangers who tell me how my journey gave them the courage to start again. A woman from Japan wrote, "You reminded me that my scars are part of my beauty." A single father from Brazil said, "Your story made me believe in tomorrow again." Each letter feels like a small miracle, a reminder that pain, when transformed, becomes light for others to follow. I keep them all in a wooden box beside my desk, labeled simply "Gratitude." When I open it, I can almost hear the echoes of all those souls healing together across languages and distances. Lily often jokes that I've become an international grandma. She's not wrong. My art and workshops have grown beyond anything I ever imagined.
Universities have invited me to speak, women's foundations have honored me, and my memoir, Becoming Light, has been translated into 12 languages. But every time someone asks how it feels to be successful, I always say the same thing. Success didn't find me, I found myself, and everything else followed. It's strange how the very things that once broke us can become the foundation for something greater. My daughter, my once estranged, angry Lily, now runs an art therapy center for women and children who've endured emotional trauma. She calls it the Bridge Studio. I still remember the day she showed me the sign above the entrance. My eyes filled with tears before I could even speak. "I wanted to carry your legacy forward, Mom," she said softly, "to make sure no one ever feels as lost as we once did." That was the moment I realized that forgiveness doesn't just heal the heart, it changes generations. Every Thursday, I visit her studio to help with classes. The room smells of paint and laughter. Women sit around long tables, brushes in hand, pouring their pain into art. Some of them have bruised hearts, some carry invisible burdens, but as colors bloom on canvas, I watch them reclaim their voices. During one session, a woman named Carla painted a single tree standing in a storm. I asked her what it meant. She said, "That's me, still standing." I smiled and replied, "Then make the roots golden." She looked at me, puzzled, and I explained, "Because no matter how strong the storm, your roots, the lessons, the love, the courage, are what keep you grounded." When she added the gold, her tears fell freely. Later that evening, as Lily and I cleaned the brushes, she turned to me with a smile. "Do you realize you've become what you needed all those years ago? A light for others." I looked at her, my heart swelling with pride. "And so have you." It's humbling to think about how far we've both come, from a night of cruel words and shattered hearts to this place of peace and purpose. Sometimes the very things we fear losing, the bond between mother and daughter, is only waiting to be reborn in a stronger, deeper form. A few months ago, I received an invitation from a global women's summit. They wanted me to be the closing speaker. The theme was reclaiming power at any age. I hesitated at first. My body tires easily now. But Lily insisted, "Mom, this is your story's final chapter. The world needs to hear it from you." So I went. Standing on that vast stage, under the soft golden lights, I looked out at thousands of faces. Women of every color, every age, every background. Some were in business suits, others in simple dresses, but their eyes carried the same longing, the desire to believe that it's not too late. I took a deep breath and began. "I stand before you not as someone extraordinary, but as someone who once gave up. I believed my worth had an expiration date. I believed my dreams were foolish, my reflection unworthy, my story too broken to tell." The room was silent. I could almost feel their hearts listening. But here's what I learned. It's never too late to begin again. Every sunrise is an invitation to start over. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be willing. Because healing isn't about forgetting what hurt you. It's about turning it into something beautiful. As I spoke, I felt tears roll down my cheeks. Not from sadness, but from release. I wasn't speaking to them anymore. I was speaking for every woman who had ever been silenced, dismissed, or told she was too old to matter. When I finished, the audience stood, clapping, cheering, crying. Some reached for each other's hands. And in that wave of love, I saw something breathtaking. Connection. Not fame, not recognition. Connection. The kind that binds souls, not stories. Afterward, Lily met me backstage. She threw her arms around me, laughing through tears. "Mom, you just changed lives tonight." I smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "No, my love, we did." That night, on the flight home, I couldn't sleep. I opened my journal, the one I've kept since the day I picked up my first paintbrush again, and began to write. To every woman who believes her story is over, know this. It's only the first chapter of a greater one. You are not what you lost. You are what you survived. As the plane soared through clouds, I watched the sunrise burst through the horizon, painting the sky in orange and gold. It felt symbolic, like life itself whispering, "You made it through the night." Now, as I sit in my quiet studio years later, I no longer measure time by pain or success. I measure it by moments of truth. The sound of Lily's laughter, the sight of Noah's tiny paint-covered hands, the letters from strangers who found hope through my story, these are the brushstrokes of a life well lived. On the wall in front of me hangs my final piece, one I began without intention and finished without expectation. It's abstract, filled with swirling hues of gold, crimson, and deep blue. At its center, a faint silhouette of a woman stands, her arms open to the sky, light spilling around her like a halo. I titled it, "Becoming Light, the Final Chapter." When Lily asked what it meant, I told her, "It's not about me. It's about every woman who's ever thought she wasn't enough." It's a reminder that light isn't something we find, it's something we become. As I write these words, I feel peace settle over me like the softest blanket. My story began with heartbreak, but it ends with love, the kind that doesn't fade with time, but deepens. Because in the end, the greatest masterpiece I ever created wasn't my art, my success, or my legacy. It was forgiveness. The morning light filters softly through my studio window, painting the room in shades of gold and silver. Time has slowed now, not cruelly, but kindly. My body moves more carefully, my breath a little shorter, but my heart beats with the quiet strength of a life fulfilled. At 76, I've learned that aging isn't a loss. It's a graduation of the soul. Every wrinkle carries a memory, every tremor a story. And I've lived enough stories to fill 1,000 canvases. The doctor says I should rest more, that my heart is fragile. I just smile. If only he knew the storms this heart has survived. Words that cut deeper than knives, nights drowned in tears, days spent rebuilding from ashes. No, my heart isn't fragile. It's seasoned. It's the proof that a woman can be broken and still beat with grace. These days, my studio has become quieter, filled with the scent of old brushes and dry paint. The walls are lined with my life's work, from the storm within to the bridge between us and my final piece, becoming light. Each one whispers back pieces of my soul. Sometimes I stand before them and wonder if they'll outlive me. I hope they will. Art has a way of carrying love long after our hands have stilled. Lily visits every day now. She brings Noah, who's grown into a kind, gentle boy of 10, curious like his mother, thoughtful like his grandmother. He loves to sit beside me while I paint. I let him add small strokes to my last canvas, a collaboration between generations. "You'll finish this one for me someday," I tell him with a smile. He always replies, "But Grandma, your paintings are already perfect." I laugh softly, Perfection isn't the goal, my love. It's truth that matters. Sometimes I catch Lily watching me with that same expression I once had when I looked at my mother, that mixture of fear and tenderness that comes from knowing time is slipping through your fingers. She'll fuss over me, making tea, fluffing pillows, reminding me to take my medicine. But what she doesn't realize is that her care is my greatest comfort. Once upon a time, we were two hearts divided by anger. Now we are bound by something unbreakable, understanding. One evening after Noah went to bed, I asked her to sit with me. The fire crackled softly in the fireplace, casting shadows that danced across the room. I handed her a small envelope tied with golden ribbon. "What is this?" she asked, smiling. "It's for when I'm gone," I said simply. Her smile faltered. "Mom, please don't." I placed my hand over hers. "Shush. It's not goodbye. It's just my way of leaving a little light behind." She nodded, tears filling her eyes, and tucked the envelope into her pocket. That night, after she left, I sat at my desk and began to write in my journal one last time. My hand trembled, but my heart felt steady. To my daughter, Lily, I once thought that growing old meant fading away, but I've learned that true aging is not the dimming of life, but its deepening. You gave me the greatest gift, a reason to rediscover myself. Every time I doubted my worth, your words echoed in my soul until they became a challenge I needed to overcome. And I did. Forgive yourself, my dear, for the girl you were then. We all speak from pain sometimes, and pain doesn't define us. Love does. Promise me you'll keep creating. Paint, write, sing, build, anything that keeps your soul awake. Don't wait for the world's permission. Just be. And when the world tells you you're too old, too tired, or too late, remember me and smile, because it's never too late to begin again. With love that transcends time, your mother, who became light. I closed the journal, placed it beside my bed, and looked around the room one last time. The moonlight fell on becoming light, its golden hues shimmering softly. I whispered, "It's finished." The next morning, Lily found me sitting in my chair by the window, my hands resting peacefully on my lap, my face turned toward the sunlight. She told me later that I looked like I was simply watching the dawn, and maybe I was, the dawn of something greater. In the days that followed, people came from all over to pay their respects. Artists, students, mothers, women who had once written to me. They filled the gallery where my final exhibition was held. But it wasn't a funeral, it was a celebration. They called it the light she left behind. Lily stood at the podium, her voice trembling but proud. She said, "My mother taught me that life is art, that every pain is a color, every moment of brushstroke. She wasn't just my mother, she was my teacher, my mirror, my compass. And though she's gone, her light will guide us forever." Noah stepped forward then, holding a small painting, a bright sunrise painted in gold and pink. He placed it under my portrait, whispering, "I finished it for you, Grandma." The audience wept, not from sorrow, but from beauty. Years passed. Lily continued the work we started. The Bridge Studio expanded to different cities. Women and children who had once felt invisible found their voices through art. And in the main hall of every studio, one painting hung permanently, becoming light. It became more than art. It became a symbol, a reminder that no matter how deep the wound, healing is always possible, that a single spark of courage can illuminate generations. On the 10th anniversary of my passing, Lily published my journals under the title Letters from the Light. The book became a global movement, inspiring women everywhere to share their stories, to forgive, to rise, to create. In one interview, Lily said something that touched millions. My mother wasn't famous because she painted. She was famous because she transformed. She turned pain into purpose, and in doing so, she taught the world to heal. And so my story didn't end with my death. It began anew in the hearts of those I touched. Sometimes I like to imagine my spirit wandering through the galleries where my paintings hang. I see people standing before them, eyes glistening, whispering, if she could do it, maybe I can too. And in that moment, I know I am still here. And every brushstroke, every word, every act of courage. Because legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you leave within. And though I may no longer hold a brush, I've painted something eternal. The truth that love, forgiveness, and courage never die. They simply change forms. So, if someone somewhere looks up at my painting and feels hope stir within them, then I've done what I came to do. I became light.
It has been 20 years since my mother left this world, yet I still feel her presence in every corner of my life. Sometimes when I walk into the studio early in the morning and the sunlight streams across the canvases, I swear I can hear her soft humming, the same melody she used to sing when she painted. Time has done little to dull her light. If anything, it has made it shine brighter. The world remembers her as Evelyn Carter, the woman who turned pain into art. But to me, she was simply Mom, my compass, my storm, my peace. After her passing, it took me months to be able to open the envelope she gave me that last night. I couldn't bring myself to do it, not yet. Her voice still echoed in my mind, her laughter still lingered in the walls, and I was afraid that reading her final words would make her absence too real. But one evening, after putting Noah to bed, I sat by her old chair, the same one where she took her final breath, and finally untied the golden ribbon. Her handwriting flowed across the paper, delicate but steady, like the rhythm of her heart. My Lily, if you are reading this, know that I am not gone. I live in every color you choose, in every act of kindness you give. Do not mourn me. Continue the story we began. And remember, light does not disappear, it simply changes direction. I cried for hours that night, not from grief, but from gratitude, because she was right. She hadn't left me. She had simply become something eternal, a whisper in the wind, a shimmer on water, a warmth in the sunrise. In the years that followed, I poured everything I had into the Bridge Studio. What started as a single room filled with brushes and broken hearts became a worldwide movement. There are now 47 centers across continents, from New York to Nairobi, from Tokyo to Istanbul, each one helping women and children rediscover themselves through art and storytelling. Every studio has a replica of my mother's final painting, Becoming Light, hung in the main hall. Beneath it, engraved in brass, are her words. Forgiveness is the color that never fades. It's astonishing how those words, once born from her private pain, became a beacon for thousands. Women write to us daily telling how her story helped them leave abusive marriages, heal from loss, rebuild their self-worth, or simply find the courage to create again. My mother's legacy isn't locked in museums, it lives in them. Noah is 29 now. He's an artist too, just like his grandmother, though his style is wildly different. Abstract, bold, unafraid. His first international exhibition was titled The Colors of Her. When I asked who her referred to, he smiled softly and said, "Grandma, she's the reason I paint." During his opening speech, he shared a story that made the entire gallery silent. "When I was 10, he said, Grandma told me that perfection wasn't the goal, truth was. I didn't understand it then,
But now I realize she wasn't teaching me how to paint. She was teaching me how to live. He ended the speech with tears in his eyes and whispered, "This one's for you, Grandma." I could almost feel her smiling somewhere in the light above us. As for me, I've written books about her journey, not as a daughter chasing her mother's shadow, but as a woman continuing her message. My most recent book, The Woman Who Became Light, became a global bestseller, translated into more than 20 languages. But more than the success, what touches me are the letters I receive, like the one from a woman in India who wrote, "I was ready to give up until I read about your mother. Now I'm learning to paint again." Every letter reminds me of something Mom once said. Art is not about showing the world what you can do, it's about showing the world that it's okay to feel. And maybe that's why her story never faded, because it was never about her fame or her skill. It was about feeling, about reminding people that brokenness can be beautiful if you let light through the cracks. Sometimes I visit her grave, not to cry, but to talk. I tell her about Noah, about the new studios opening in South America, about the mural of her face that now adorns the side of the Women's Art Museum in London. It's 20 feet tall, her eyes serene, her smile timeless, surrounded by golden swirls of color. Beneath it reads, "She became light and showed others how to do the same." Every time I stand before it, I whisper, "You did it, Mom. You changed the world." One winter afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I found her old paintbrush, worn, bristles stiff, handle chipped. I held it for a long time, feeling its weight, its history. And in that quiet moment, I realized something profound. My mother never truly taught me how to paint. She taught me how to see. To see beauty in pain, to see meaning in mistakes, to see possibility in endings. That night, I placed the brush inside a glass case in the main studio. A small plaque beneath it reads, "The brush that painted forgiveness." Women often stop and stare at it for a while. Some smile, some cry, all of them touched by the silent power it holds. Now, as I grow older, I find myself repeating her words to my own students. It's never too late to begin again. And every time I say them, I feel her standing beside me, her hand gently resting on my shoulder, her warmth wrapping around me like sunlight. I sometimes wonder what she would say if she could see all this, the galleries, the studios, the books, the movement her courage created. But I think I already know. She'd smile softly and say, "It was never about me. It was always about the light." Last month, on what would have been her 96th birthday, Noah and I organized an event called The Night of Light. Thousands gathered in cities across the world, each person holding a candle, standing before her painting, sharing one story of forgiveness or rebirth. As the candles flickered in the night, illuminating faces filled with hope, I felt her presence everywhere. And in that moment, I finally understood the full circle of her journey. She began in the dark, she found her spark, and now her light lives on, not in galleries or books, but in people, in women who rise again, in children who create without fear, in families who learn to love through pain. As I stood before the crowd, candle in hand, I whispered her final words out loud, the same ones she wrote in that last letter. Light does not disappear. It simply changes direction. And as thousands of voices echoed those words back to me under the starlit sky, I looked up, tears streaming down my face, and smiled. Because I knew, somewhere beyond the horizon, she was watching, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as what she always promised she would become.